on the channel, we got a quasi countdown for the Kyle Peterson Top 5, as today we're only doing 4. And what are we doing? We're doing the Mount Rushmore of wrestling action figures.
And the spirit of Ultimate Warrior will run forever!
Welcome everyone, Kyle here, and welcome back to the channel for another edition of the Kyle Peterson Top 5, a Thursday tradition here on the channel. As every Thursday we're doing a Top 5 or occasionally a Top 10 countdown. However, this time we got a bit of a twist going on with this one, as we're only doing 4 figures here. And it's not necessarily a countdown, as they're all created equal, I guess is what we're going to say. But I'm counting down, or talking about more like it, my top 4, of course, Mount Rushmore wrestling figures of all time. Now, gotta set the parameters on this one a little bit here. Now, this isn't my personal favorite wrestlers. This isn't my personal favorite action figures. This is as far as action figures in the world, the galaxy, the universe, whatever you want to call it. Maybe the top 4 most important wrestling figures of all time. Maybe the top 4 most known wrestling figures of all time. Once again, this isn't my favorite list. That's not what this is. This is, you ask your Aunt Jenny to show, hey, who is this? And can you think of a wrestling figure? It's a wrestling figure that transcends the action figure aisle, that transcends collectors, that the average Joe might know about. Or maybe it's a parent, you know, that every kid had to have this figure back in the day. That's what we're talking about in this Mount Rushmore of wrestling action figures. The 4 most famous. The most famous wrestling figures of all time. That's what we're counting down. Now, this is extremely challenging, and we'll explain it a little bit as we go. And I guess it's not really a countdown, but I'm going to go in order of release of the figures is how I'm going to do it in my head. You can do it however you want, but we're only picking 4. That's Mount Rushmore. The 4 figures, whether you like them or not, whether you like that character or not, the most famous wrestling figures of all time. We're doing the Mount Rushmore 4 right here. Maybe a different video down the road, we'll do my 4 Mount Rushmore wrestling figures of all time. But today is just popularity, general pop culture knowledge, whatever you want to call it, the 4 most famous wrestling figures of all time. Now, a little different than a normal countdown. Like I said, I'm going to go in order of release. Going to be 4 figures. They're all created equal, I guess is what we'll call it on here. And we'll talk about some guys that maybe just missed this one here. And I'm going to give my reasoning for mine. You feel free to chime in with your reasoning below. And the beautiful thing with these videos, my list, 100% right, your list, 100% right. Remember that, of course. So, but let's kick it off, I guess, with the first one. Whoa, stop the clock. Before we get into this Mount Rushmore video, I want to say, you guys know I film a lot of stuff way ahead of time, and I filmed this about a month ago in my San Diego Comic-Con preparations. Well, Mount Rushmore, obviously Hulk Hogan passed away since that time, so just want everybody to know this was filmed before the passing of Hulk Hogan. We begin the Mount Rushmore of wrestling action figures here, and I would say this one we're going to do first. This is the most famous wrestling figure of all time. It feels like every kid in the 80s had this, whether they liked wrestling or not. Everybody has seen this figure one time or not in their life. Your grandma, your grandpa, your aunt, your uncle, they all know who this is. They've all seen this for whatever reason. What are we talking about? Well, this is an easy layup. Have to imagine it's on most people's list, if it really should be on everybody's list, but it's your list. This one, Hulk Hogan, LJN, the first Hulk Hogan. Now, myself, like many kids, had this figure in the 80s. Tons of kids that didn't even like wrestling had this in the 80s. It was just one of those things. Now, as far as playability, as far as LJN Hogan's go, I love the white shirt one that came many, many years later. That was my absolute favorite Hulk Hogan in the LJN days. This was serviceable. This one was great for a lot of kids, and a lot of kids, this is their favorite action figure of all time. And you can easily say this is the most famous wrestling figure of all time, because once again, it was everywhere. Every store had this, and about every single kid in the 80s and maybe even to the 90s had this figure at one time or another. So there's no denying it. Have to think this is on everybody's Mount Rushmore. It is the LJN Hulk Hogan. Next up on the Mount Rushmore, this could be a little bit controversial right here, but once again, it's my list. And I could easily say this could be another Hulk Hogan figure, but it's not. It's not. It's the Ultimate Warrior. That's where we're going to with the second head, and we're going to Hasbro Series 1 Ultimate Warrior. Now, let me explain myself, of course, and I can see some people saying the Gorilla Press Slam Hulk Hogan should be on this list, but to me and my buddies and the old playground once upon a time, this was the one everybody wanted. Now, I was very fortunate as a kid to have the Grand Toys, LJN, Grand Toys, whatever you want to call it, Ultimate Warrior. Most people did not have that. Most people didn't even know that existed. For an entire generation, this was their first ever chance at an Ultimate Warrior figure. And even me having the LJN, this was absolute game changer here. Now, the crazy thing is, this isn't even my favorite Ultimate Warrior from the Hasbro days. I love the third one as far as playability goes. I remember being disappointed that he was like the rockers in the jumper position, but I could look past so much when it came to the Ultimate Warrior, as could my friends, as could the people on the playground. There was a buzz, there was an excitement about the Hasbro line, and I'll never forget walking into my Toys R Us, seeing these for the first time, not even knowing they were coming out, and then all of a sudden I was a very lucky kid because I had the LJNs and I had the Hasbros, and I played with both of them at the same time. Well, not together, but at the same time. So it was a magical time to be an action figure collector, especially a wrestling figure collector. But this Ultimate Warrior trumped a lot of things for a lot of kids with their first ever chance at getting an Ultimate Warrior figure. And for me personally, definitely deserves a spot on the Mount Rushmore of wrestling figures. All right, we keep on going here with the third head on Mount Rushmore. And I think as each one goes, maybe we get a little bit more controversial, maybe not. But this one was the buzz all over the place, and it was the buzz of an older generation. Of course, I put myself, for example, growing up as a little kid in the Hogan, Warrior, Macho Man days. And then as you get into your teen years, what came about? Well, the Attitude Era. And unfortunately, Hasbro's went dormant. We got rid of the Hasbros. There was the Bendhams. I don't talk about them. I don't count those as wrestling figures. And there was a lull. But then Jakks came to us with Bone Crunchers. And I'll once again never forget seeing these Bone Crunchers and just thinking forever, I'm not collecting wrestling figures anymore. There's no wrestling figures. And then voila, here's Series 1 at my Toys R Us in my face. Had to pick these up. But in a plot twist, it is tell the Bad Boys editions a couple of series later for Jakks to make this list. And at the time, this character, this performer, this Hall of Famer was on the lips of everybody, be it a wrestling fan or not a wrestling fan. It is the first action figure of one Stone Cold Steve Austin with the Jakks Bone Cruncher Bad Boys. Now, maybe about it. It's nowhere near as nostalgic and iconic as the last two we talked about. But for entire generations, an entire kid universe and even adult universe, this was a hot figure. Everybody had to have this one. You know, you go to the store and everybody be there except for Austin. Austin would be always picked out of this one here. And this is about as plain as it gets for an action figure. I guess not terribly different than the LJN Hogan, but you're just looking at a guy in black boots and black trunks. But man, we all know the power of Stone Cold, and especially getting him in your Fig Fed was a huge, huge deal. And I could be debated like anything else, but to me, this one belongs on, of course, the Mount Rushmore because it was on the tips of many people's tongues. Have you seen the Stone Cold figure? Have you seen the Stone Cold figure? And I do think a little bit shine has been taken off this one because Jakks really pumped out the Stone Cold figures. They even pumped out better figures than this one, but you always remember your first, and I think this one is extra special for its own way to be our first ever really Stone Cold Steve Austin figure, and it swept a generation off their feet. So to me, he belongs on the Mount Rushmore. And now there's only 4 heads. There's only one left. What's that figure going to be? Stay tuned. All right, we're at the number 4 spot, the last head on Mount Rushmore here. And this is going to be a pretty tough one if you ask me. But I looked and I searched and I had some ideas. I had some thoughts. Maybe I'll talk about those here in a second. But this one I think had to go on the list. Very similar reasons kind of for Steve Austin. It was a great return, and it was a line that started with an absolute bang, and it started with this guy really bringing the fury to this one. Now, we go back to the days of 2010. So you probably know where I'm going. When Jakks lost the license to Mattel. And Jakks had a lot of great figures. I'm a Jakks apologist. I enjoyed it. I think a lot of people have 2025 vision when they look at Jakks, but they don't go back and look at it with, 2008, 2004 eyes like they should. But Jakks had a lot of amazing things, including the Jakks Classic Superstars. You know I'm just a classics guy. Even wrote a book on it. Check out my book, The Complete Guide to the Jakks Classic Superstars series on Barnes & Noble and Amazon if you haven't already. But the Classic Superstars line was amazing, and there was a lot of figures. It was tough for me not to put the Warrior on this list from that Classic Superstars. It was also tough not to put that Bret Hart and Legion of Doom on this list, but I couldn't do it. But I will say there was a character that was missing from Classic Superstars that Mattel brought into the process extremely early that made Mattel just right from the get-go be the real deal in a lot of people's eyes. What are we talking about? We're, of course, talking about the Macho Man Randy Savage. We're talking about that defining moments from 2010 here. For Mattel to get the Macho Man, and they also got Ricky Steamboat, another one that was missing from Classic Superstars. To get those figures early on gave them a lot of credibility of the next wrestling genre or team making figures, I guess the Mattel team. This Macho Man was big. There was a lot of people that didn't collect wrestling at the time that came around. Did you see Macho Man's back with a figure? Have you seen that? Macho even filmed some videos for this one, which I thought was really cool as well. And of course, it truly is a defining moment. We'll never forget the Ultimate Warrior Macho Man, will we? Never. We'll never forget it. But a big one was this Macho Man here, and really changed the wrestling figure business in a lot of ways. Maybe not as iconic, definitely not as iconic as the Hulk Hogan LJN Once Upon a Time, obviously, just because of the time and the place with this one. But this one was a big deal that transcended over things. I remember my dad saying, "Oh, did you see Macho Man's got a figure?" This one passed through just the regular wrestling figure, action figure fans to the general public. Maybe not quite like Hulk Hogan did, but pretty close, at least for 2010 and the way the world was at the time. So this one was a very heavy hitter here, and I guess I'll bring them all out right now. Now, a couple of honorable mentions, and I should say, here it is. This is my Mount Rushmore of the most famous, transcending action figures, everything else, the most famous foursome of all time, the Mount Rushmore of wrestling figures, in my opinion. And like I said, there was some that I left off, like Hasbro. I think that Hulk Hogan Series 1, there's some people that can make the case for that one, of course. I don't know if there's any other Jakks that really stole people's heart like this one. Mattel's had a lot of amazing figures, but the problem with Mattel was, or is currently, there's so many figures, hundreds and hundreds of figures. There's tons and tons of every character. So it really doesn't feel as special because there's so many more. Now the LJN one, of course, it's the first. It's really what put wrestling figures on the map. I know Tom Farron was going to say Remco, but I wouldn't say Remco, but I think the LJNs are what transcended wrestling fandom for a lot of people. Now I almost put the Iron Sheik on here because, like anybody that buys wrestling figures, you always remember your first wrestling figure. Mine was Outback Jack once upon a time. Hopefully, if you're luckier than I was, you get two wrestling figures at the same time. And for a whole generation, they got this Hulk Hogan. They also got the Iron Sheik. So that Iron Sheik, well, maybe not the most popular of all time, was a figure so many kids had to go and square off against their Hulk Hogan. So I would say that Sheik figure from LJN, extremely iconic. And I think if you had to take any set of wrestling figures and you had to put it as the top of the heap, I think it's LJN, because in most eyes, they're first. Yes, there's Remco's. Yes, there's some stuff from Japan. But for most people, that's the first. And that was a huge boom for wrestling fandom. And there was a lot of figures in LJN, but not a ton when you think of course, like Jakks in the Mattel days. That's for sure. So it feels a little bit special, the LJN days here. But I don't know. This is a very controversial topic, more like it, more of a controversial topic, or maybe I'm the target, who knows? But it is very tough to do. It is very hard to do. Now, once again, this is different than my 4 favorite wrestling figures. This is the 4 most famous wrestling figures of all time that transcend everything else. And I got to think everybody's got this Hogan. I think a lot of people will have the Warrior. It gets a little bit dicey with the Macho Man and Steve Austin, but I've made my case, and I'd be interested to hear your case in the comments down below. Be interested to hear your top 4. Now, once again, this isn't yours inside of you. This is what you think is transcended. This is what was discussed on the playground. This is what got excited. Maybe it's a John Cena figure. Obviously, I wasn't on the playground when John Cena's first figure came out, but I'd be very interested to hear your opinion. What crosses over let me know in the comments down below. And of course, you guys know, subscribe to the channel here, subscribe to my other YouTube channel. Check out YouTube channel memberships. Check out the Patreon for early access and even more content every single day. Every single day. You know we don't disappoint over here. Sir Paul64 on the X, _Kyle_Peterson on Threads, Instagram, TikTok, and the Kyle Peterson Show at gmail.com. And of course, the Kyle Peterson Show, my weekly podcast each and every single Tuesday, wherever podcasts are found, with video cast on YouTube. So for the Mount Rushmore of wrestling figures, I'm Kyle. See you guys all real soon.
Well, are we gonna dance or are we gonna play?